So after working with well over 50 early stage B2B SaaS startups, I can confidently say that most startups are focusing on the wrong problems in their business. They're building features that nobody wants. They're targeting low value customers who inherently are never going to stick around, or they're communicating a proposition to the market that just isn't worth the value that they're trying to capture. And I've discovered through working with these startups that most problems in early stage businesses, so early stage specifically, come down to just 4 variables, which I'm going to run through in this video. And if you're able to effectively solve these 4 variables, it really is the difference between, having 10 to 20% improvements in your business or scoring absolute home runs where you can get 50x, 100x return. So let's jump into the video. Okay, now if you're building a early stage startup, then I probably don't have to preach to you how hard it is to go from 0 to 1 in this in today's market conditions. And so before I continue, in the description, I think I'll put it in the description, there'll be some links to customer case studies and testimonials to just prove that the startups I worked with have actually gotten results, and some of them have gone on to do tens of millions in profit, not revenue, in profit, while being bootstrapped without raising venture capital. Now, the first variable we're going to jump into is the customer variable. Everything begins with your market, right? Which is what your customer sits in. Every company is either made, or every great company is defined or killed by their market, right? There's actually a famous quote by Mark Andreessen. I'm going to butcher it, but it says something like, market matters most. A great product and team can't save you if your market sucks, right? If you're just fishing in the wrong ocean, then you're destined to fail. It doesn't matter how switched on or smart you are or how great you are at building a product. You're just destined for failure, right? So let's break the customer variable down, right? So the first point I want to talk about is, he who chases 2 rabbits catches none. So I actually heard this quote years ago from a great marketer called Sam Ovens. And I think this poison that most startups have is just really a lack of focus. They're trying to go after too many market segments. They're trying to serve mid-market enterprise while also doing a PLG motion for the bottom of the market, despite only doing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in revenue. Really, you should be finding product market fit in a single market segment before moving on. Or they're targeting multiple personas. They're targeting marketers and salespeople and operations people. And the reason why you shouldn't do this is because each one of those personas has their own problems, their own motivations. And if you're trying to serve all of them, well, you're just going to do like a 5 to 6 out of 10 job for any given persona, but you're never going to be able to do a 9 out of 10, a 10 out of 10 job for any given persona, which is what you need to do to, build a remarkable company that's going to reach product market fit and grow to tens of millions in revenue. Now, this is one of those classic things where I could say this 100 times and majority of people are still going to make this mistake, right? What I've learned through working with a bunch of founders is that all of these lessons that, we're taught over the last decade by experienced founders and entrepreneurs, every single founder thinks their situation is different. These rules don't apply to me. They pay lip service to it, and it always bites them in the ass, right? So you need to start small before you go big. Look at any great software company. They always started small. Stripe started just as a payment infrastructure for APIs. They served developers. Now they're the payment infrastructure for most startups. You look at Twilio, again, like an SMS API, now $1 billion company. I can go on and on with all of these great companies that initially started small. And this could be not just the customer going after one persona, but also one problem, having one core capability in the product, having one core value proposition. So going narrow doesn't have to just be to the customer. The second one is best fit segments. So I kind of touched on this earlier, getting ahead of myself here. Really, when it comes to finding product market fit, you should be finding that within a single market segment, right? So if you want to go up market, you should go after that segment, and you should have the correct go-to-market motions in place to communicate your message to that segment, to generate leads from that segment, to close those leads. There's a whole motion that wraps around that. And so if you're trying to go after two market segments at once, well, they're both going to require different messages. They're both going to require different go-to-market strategies, how you acquire leads, how you close those leads. Is it PLG? Is it through inside sales with an AE? It just introduces so much complexity. And so when it comes to customer, you should be trying to serve your best fit segment. Now, what do I mean by best fit? Well, there's a couple of ways you can measure this, and I'll get rid of the next one because it's kind of relevant to this, right? So you've got on the quantitative side where you can empirically measure your best fit customer, where if we start at the top of the funnel with awareness, these people are resonating with your content more. For example, if you're doing content marketing, you have inbound DMs, you're building relationships and partnerships because these people are resonating with your message, all the way down the funnel to conversion, where these people are converting at a higher rate relative to other market segments or personas. When they use your product, their usage or retention is higher than other market segments or personas. And so you should really be able to prove your best fit segment and ideal persona. And obviously you're only able to do this if you're measuring in the first place, which most startups aren't doing. But this is how you arrive at your best fit segment, right? Not just vibes or this is the customer I want to serve, because very often you'll discover that, most startups eventually pivot, and it's because they realize, oh, actually this persona over here is better to serve. And so the same could be said for ideal persona as well. Ideally, you're just going to be going after one persona in the early stages. All of my content is really focused for those startups sort of under 1 million ARR. And this just allows you to provide the best experience to this persona, right? If you look at Clay, which is a classic example in the go-to-market space, they didn't start off being a tool for cold email. I think they started off being a tool for developers, like a no-code solution. They discovered that outbound personas were using their product. They doubled down on that persona. And what that allowed them to do is it allowed them to build a product that was more beneficial to that persona that might have not been as useful for developers anymore or recruiters. And it also allowed them to find their UGC growth loop, where these outbound personas were happy to post content about Clay organically because they found value from the product. And that's because Clay built the product for them, and Clay launched certain features that benefited this persona, and this persona was incentivized to post this content, right? So everything kind of just worked together well. That would have never happened if they didn't see those signals and narrow down on that persona and focus on serving that persona. If they were spread across multiple personas, they might have been able to achieve the same outcome, but would have just extended the time horizon exponentially because, obviously they only have so many resources internally. And I'll come on to later about the concept of product channel fit because that does tie into it nicely. Now, how do you know if you've gone deep enough on your customer? A good sort of simple sniff test here is if you're able to stand up in front of people and give a 40-minute presentation on the professional life of your customer, right? That's how deeply you need to understand your customer. And this is why a lot of successful founders, they are selling into a market that they previously worked in or selling to a persona that they were previously, because they understand it at such a deep level, and that's their edge, right? So you want to get to that level of understanding where you just deeply, deeply understand your customers. Now, moving on to the next variable, you can find, the perfect customer, but if you're not solving an urgent problem that they're willing to pay for, then you don't have a business, right? So that brings us on to the next variable, which is problem. So just get rid of these. So the best problems are urgent, sort of take my money right now. I need to get this solved because things are going to go wrong if we don't solve this problem, or we're going to lose our competitive edge, or there are things happening at a macro level in the economy or the industry, and we need a competitive advantage to get ahead. An urgent problem that people are willing to throw their money at you to solve. Pervasive, so they're widespread. Again, maybe there's this sort of trend that's happening at a macro level. There's a lot going on in the SaaS industry at the moment with AI, with changes in buyer behavior. where now it's harder to stand out, and there's all these competitive factors that sort of trickle down from that. And so there's a lot of change happening at the moment in the SaaS industry with regards to how we sell to buyers, where, how we enable them and how we give them the right information at the right time, because they no longer have to play by our rules, right? This is a pervasive problem. And then, of course, expensive. This one's a bit more subjective, but, naturally as a business, you're in the game of generating money. And so you want to solve expensive problems. The best way to put this is, if you want to build a $10 million business, then you need to be solving $10 million problems, right? And this is why naturally I lean more towards B2B, because businesses have money, they're willing to pay more money, and shy away from consumer, where, consumers have less money. And so they're going to have higher churn. The average revenue per user is going to be lower, right? So you always want to go after the more expensive problems, but there is a balance, because the more expensive you go, then that is going to reflect in your go-to-market motion. So you might need an inside sales team or a sales team to sell the software, because it's more expensive, which means it's inherently probably more complex. And that might not be the business you want to build, right? So, use your own judgment there. Secondly, then, jobs versus problems, right? So this is a good point. So normal advice, right? And I've kind of fell victim to this, is, find problems, solve problems. But I just want to add a little nuance here, because we all have problems. Just think of yourself. You probably have, 5 to 10 problems on your plate right now, especially if you're an entrepreneur or, working in a high pressure environment, not necessarily an entrepreneur. But just because you have all of those problems doesn't mean you're motivated to solve them, right? I have a pair of trainers in the other room that are the wrong size. I paid a lot of money for them and I need to return them, right? That's a problem. But why haven't I returned them already? Well, because I have other things on my plate that I'd rather solve first. I'm not that motivated to solve that problem, right? And so that's where the jobs to be done framework comes in. I've actually got I'll link a resource on the jobs to be done framework. I had a conversation recently with a marketing executive on this. But I like to look, when looking at customers, I like to understand their jobs rather than just problems, right? So if you think of companies consist of employees, team members, and these team members go into work every single day and they complete tasks, they complete jobs, they complete projects and workflows, right? We have the annual goal that's set by the company. We need to hit this revenue figure or this kind of objective. That trickles down into departments who set their OKRs, their quarterly objectives, which trickles down into monthly targets and, weekly projects, right? So people are going to work every single day to do their job, right? Which breaks down into tasks and projects, right? And that's where software fits in. When people, when the CEO is setting the annual target for the company, they don't go, right, we need to hit 10 million ARR. What software can we buy to help us hit this target? They don't say that, right? They set projects and priorities and they build a strategy which breaks down into the daily and weekly things that the company is going to do. That's where the software comes in, right? Software helps people do their job. It helps them complete workflows, right? Like a cold email software doesn't help people increase their revenue. It helps them send cold emails. It helps them manage their inbox more effectively, right? These are all jobs and tasks that eventually go up to booking more meetings, getting more pipeline. Those pipeline turn into customers, and that helps the company hit their revenue target. But the software isn't helping them hit the revenue target, right? The software is helping them respond to their inbox more efficiently. It's helping them send more cold emails. And so the most simplest way I can communicate this is just look at your ICP's job description. You can find them on job boards. What are the individual tasks that they put in that job description? They are probably the jobs to be done, right? Need to manage cold email campaigns more effectively, need to report the cold email performance to a line manager, right? These are all the jobs to be done. And so where are the opportunities there? Where are the problems associated with these jobs where a piece of software might be able to improve things? The final point on problem is supply and demand. So the best way to put this is it's much better to supply a motivated crowd who needs to perform a task rather than trying to convince someone that a task is worth completing, right? Like if you kind of think of it as point A and point B, and somebody wants to travel to point B because they need to complete a certain project or hit a goal, it's much better trying to sell to that person and getting them to point B a faster, more effective way than communicating to someone who's at point A and say, hey, you should really go to point B, right? That's what supply and demand is. The demand is already there. They already want to get to point B. You're just going to help them get there faster, cheaper, more effectively. Like a real life example to think about this is if you've ever gone to a sports game, and usually in the stadium, they sell overpriced, crappy junk food. And we buy it, right? Even though junk food is bad and we know it's bad, we'll still buy that $12 burger or $12 hot dog, even though we know it's bad for us, even though we know it's cheap and crappy food and overpriced food, we will still buy it because we're in the stadium. We probably had a beer or two. We're hungry. We're drunk. We don't care as much as if we're at home. And so these vendors have the leverage. They can make that food overpriced, even though it's cheap, because they're quite literally selling into a starving crowd, right? They are just supplying the demand that exists. Probably very different if you were just walking down the street and there was a random burger vendor on the side. You would probably be less inclined to buy that burger, right? Because you're no longer in that situation, okay? So really much better to try supply demand that exists rather than convincing people that there's a problem that they have, because then you're trying to change behaviors, which is an expensive game to get into. Now, how do you find these problems? How do you find these jobs to be done? How do you learn more about your customer? Well, in the description, I'm going to put a resource that you can download called the structured interview method. Rather than, when I speak with founders and they're like, oh, we're struggling to grow, and then I dig deeper and they're like, well, how many people have you spoken with? The first problem is usually they're not speaking with enough people. But the second problem is when they are speaking with enough people or speaking with people, they're not being strategic with regards to how they approach these conversations. They're asking the wrong questions. They're not listening deeply. They're not validating their assumptions. They're just hopping on these calls with people and just having a coffee chat and then wondering why, the conversations weren't useful and they didn't get the insights they wanted, or they didn't come away with the conversation learning anything new. That's because they haven't approached these conversations in the right way. And so I really recommend taking a look at this resource. And when it comes to understanding your customers, validating any assumptions related to these 4 variables, you follow this structured interview method to the T, because it's going to help you get a lot more clarity with regard to these variables and just give you the confidence that you're building in the right direction. Okay, so now once you've found these burning problems, you then need to articulate how you solve that problem to the market, right? And so that brings us on to the next variable, which is proposition. Okay, so you've all heard value proposition. And so some concepts to understand about proposition then is the first one is promised land. So I kind of touched about this a bit on supply and demand, where you have people who are at point A, they're trying to get to point B, right? This is a journey that they're going on. And when I say promised land, what I mean is point B. Point B is the promised land. That's where your churn problems go away, your cold email campaigns start performing better, your website conversions increase because buyers now understand your product in a more effective way, right? This is where your customers are trying to get to, because this is how they hit their monthly target, their quarterly target. This is how the company hits their annual goal and everyone gets a bonus, right? This is the promised land. A good proposition is able to succinctly and effectively paint the picture of the promised land and communicate to the customer that you're the person that can get them there, right? Now, to be able to create a good value proposition, well, you need to be aware of what that promised land is. And so that's why this stuff comes before this stuff, right? Because how can you communicate point B to the customer if you don't even know what point B is for that specific customer, right? And then the next one is unique mechanism. There are so many software products out there. I might be lying here. You can fact check me, but I think I saw there's like 14,000 software products just in the MarTech space, right? So marketing technology space. So the broader industry, you're talking tens of thousands of products, right? A lot of them making the same promises, a lot of them at a surface level looking very similar from a features perspective. And so naturally, the question that comes to a prospect's mind is, well, what makes you different to X? What makes you different to alternative, right? And that could be another software product, or it could be just their current process for doing things. And maybe they're not using a product, or maybe they're using a person or a consultant, right? Alternatives can mean many different things. But naturally, that's the question that's going to come to their mind, is what makes you different to X? And that's where your unique mechanism comes into it, right? What is your secret sauce? Okay, what is going to make you get the prospect to point B faster than all the other alternatives, right? And this is really, really important to solve. And just being brutally honest, most people do not pay enough attention to this. They've copied a competitor, or they've built a product that's very similar to competitors, and fundamentally they're not doing a lot different to the competitor, right? And sometimes just being cheaper isn't a strong enough argument. Sometimes the customer actually cares about getting to the end result more than the price, and they're actually willing to pay more money if getting to the end result has a higher probability, right? So what is your unique mechanism? To give you an example of a client I worked with instantly, 0 to 20 million in 2 or 3 years, there'll be a case study in the description. Their unique mechanism was that they popularized the concept of inbox rotation to the market, right? So a cold email send-in tool, very competitive market, one of the most competitive markets, going against tools like Lemlist, Outreach, SalesLoft, Woodpecker. And what inbox rotation was if you looked at the existing tools, all of them were charging per seat, right? So, or per inbox. So let's say with one inbox, you could send 50 cold emails per day. If you wanted to send 100 emails or 150 emails per day, you would have to have 3 inboxes. And so they would charge you per inbox. And if that inbox is $50 an inbox, you're paying $150 a month, right? Just for simplicity's sake. Now, with Instantly's inbox rotation, what they allowed you to do is basically use unlimited inboxes. So you could have 100 email inboxes for a fixed price. And their pricing was like $37 a month and then like $97 a month. And I think it's still that price today, right? And so what that allowed them to do is create this attractive, unique value proposition that was essentially, hey, unlimited send-in for a fixed price. We're not going to charge you per inbox. We're not going to charge you per team member. You pay us $97 a month, and you can either send 100 emails a day or you can send 2,000 emails a day. We're just going to charge you $97 a month, right? And so that was a unique mechanism where it was derived from the product itself, and this is why everything interlinks so closely. But it was just so unique. Nobody else was doing this, and it was just so easy to understand, and it allowed customers to get to the promised land, which was, well, if I can send more emails, I can probably get in front of more prospects. The more prospects I can get in front of, the more meetings I can book. The more meetings I can book, the more customers I can have, right? And it truly changed the cold email space, for better or for worse. It changed the cold email space because people were able to do far more for far less. They didn't have to maybe hire SDRs anymore or buy 20K a year software. They were able to do a bunch of this stuff just with Instantly and maybe some part-time contractors, right? So unique mechanism is very, very important. And it's something that isn't easy and in most cases requires some kind of innovation. So enough said on that. So the next point is time to value, right? So this is really important as well. That the customer wants to get to point B, but how long is it going to take them to get point B? And this is why companies will evaluate different options, right? Well, if I hire a consultant or if I hire an agency, for example, to do cold email for me, well, they said it's going to take 3 months minimum. They need to do some testing, yada, yada, yada. And I'm paying them $3K a month. That's going to be $9K a month before I see some results. Or I could just buy Instantly myself. That's $97 a month. It's cheaper, but, could I get the same results that an agency could because they're specialists? Or should I hire a full-time person to handle cold email for me, but then I need to bring them on and onboard them and ramp them up, and I need to deal with insurance and all this kind of stuff, right? This is what people are going through in their mind, right? Nobody jumps out of bed in the morning and thinks, I'm going to buy a software product. They're running through their options and they're thinking about, okay, well, what's the probability that this solution could get me to the end result? What are the costs? These are all variables that they're thinking of. And one of them is time to value, right? Like, is your product hard to use? Do you, through your unique mechanism, have you, created a way to do these things more effectively? Like, again, if you look at Instantly, for example, cold email is very complicated, right? You have to mess around with DNS records. You have to buy domains and inboxes, very like complicated, somewhat technical stuff. And again, they found a way to decrease the time to value for customers by automating a lot of that inbox setup where, they automatically add the DNS records for you. They connect to your Google account through OAuth. And that means you don't have to go around messing in the Google admin panel. All of this kind of stuff that decreased the time to value, that meant their customers from signing up can get that first meeting booked as quick as possible, right? So this is also an important factor when it comes to your value proposition that too many people are ignoring. Get rid of some of this stuff. Okay, so now a real simple way to communicate your value proposition, and there's many ways to skin this cat, is we help ICP solve problem by unique approach. This is where your unique mechanism would be, so that they can outcome, right? If you cannot succinctly communicate your value proposition like this, then you do not understand your customer enough. You do not understand your value proposition enough. You do not understand why your product is differentiated, is unique, right? And you'll be surprised, you can ask most founders, hey, what problem does your product solve, or what does your product do? And they'll go on and tell you like a 2-minute story, right? That doesn't actually tell you a lot of stuff. And so there's a power in being able to succinctly communicate your product's value proposition used by this statement. Okay, so last one, now we come on to the product, right? So if the proposition is essentially the promise you're making to the customer, well, the product is how that proposition is fulfilled, right? And so it goes without saying, it's really important that your product is capable of fulfilling that proposition, right? There's no point in having the best marketing in the world, the best claims that really resonate with the market, if when people sign up to your product, they're not actually able to realize that outcome. They're not actually able to get to point B, or it takes too long, or it just straight out fails, right? So something we're seeing at the moment in the AI SDR market is, on the surface, the proposition is great, right? Automate your cold email. You don't need SDRs. You don't even need cold email agencies. You don't need to manage people. We'll just do the end-to-end process for you. And basically what's happened, I don't want to speculate too much, but it seems like they have failed to fulfill the proposition. And how do you know they failed to fulfill the proposition? Well, because they have like 70% churn rates, right? And customers are only going to churn if they don't get the results they want. Or even there's a factor there where they're the wrong customers in the first place. But your product has to be able to fulfill the proposition, right? Otherwise, you're just going to end up in a world of hurt where people churn. But worst of all, that's kind of a short-term effect. The long-term effects are when people start spreading negative word of mouth and saying, hey, this product is trash, then that thing can stick around for years, right? And so you need to have a good product that needs to be able to fulfill the proposition. Now, why product is last is, well, to fulfill the proposition, you first of all need to know what the proposition is, right? And to know the proposition, well, you need to know what problems you're solving. And to know what problems you're solving, well, you need to know the customer and their problems, right? And so that's why product comes last, because you need to know what you're building for and who you're building for so that you can efficiently solve them. The second thing is sticky. So ideally, your product is going to be sticky in the sense that when customers use it, they stay around, right? You just become embedded in their organization. You become, if they were to lose you, they would be in a bad position. Maybe they wouldn't get to point B anymore, or maybe they wouldn't be able to achieve their goals anymore, right? So you want a sticky product, whether that be you expand into different teams in the organization through a good product-led growth/sales motion. So you become very sticky, where it's not just one person's opinion anymore, it's 10 people's opinion to remove you from the organization. Maybe it's through integrating into their workflows through product integrations where you plug into their CRM, and to get rid of you would probably just be a really costly and timely project to do. Or maybe you're just delivering so much value to them that they use you all the time, and they're getting so much value that leaving you just wouldn't be an option, right? And this is really the difference between being nice to have and a must have. Nice to have products are, we can just go to competitor B, it's cheaper, might not get all the features, but we don't use this. Like, for example, this software I'm using at the moment here, Whimsical, is a nice to have for me because I don't use it a lot, and I could use any whiteboarding software, right? Whereas something sticky could be, maybe it's stored all my data and it's use that data to make the product experience better, and if I left the product I would lose access to that data. That's where products start to become sticky through data or network effects, right? Finally, this has gone a bit longer than I thought. I thought this would be a 10-minute video. Product channel fit. So this is super, super important, right? You cannot control channels, right? You cannot decide what Facebook does, right? You cannot control Facebook ads. They can turn Facebook ads off tomorrow. Maybe, they hit some compliance. They do something wrong and they get shut down. There's nothing you can do about that, right? You can't control channels, but you can control your product. And so that's what product channel fit is. You build your product for the channel. So very early on, I talked about Clay, how they sort of doubled down on that outbound persona. Now, they found strong product channel fit because they built a product that had a relatively quick time to value, where I could sign up. I didn't have to speak to a salesperson. I could use the product. I could click around. I could get value from it. There is some kind of learning curve there. But they also had features such as shareability features that incentivized users to share the product, right? So for example, in Clay, you can create templates. It wasn't always that way. And you could share those templates, right? Those templates are a form of content, and they're user-generated content because the user is creating those templates and sharing those with people. And so whether they're sharing them in Slack or with team members or on social media, that is a form of user-generated content that would not be possible if those features weren't available in the first place, right? So that's what I mean by product channel fit. There's a common saying of distribution matters most, right? And my interpretation of this saying isn't that, screw the product, you should just be cold emailing people and posting content. That's not my interpretation of that saying. My interpretation of that saying is that you should build the product with distribution in mind from day one, right? You should, if you want to build a product that can benefit from viral marketing, then you need to build a product that can benefit from viral marketing, right? You don't just build any product and hope to go viral. Or if you want to build a product that you can grow via paid marketing, then again, you need to build the product with that in mind. Maybe you need to have a model that makes that viable so you can actually get a good CAC to LTV ratio. Or something that's really important in paid marketing is time to value, right? If inherently, if you're advertising on paid social, colder audience, colder traffic, don't know who you are, if you're making them jump through all these loops to experience your product's value, then again, that's going to affect your funnel, because the cash conversion cycle is going to be longer because there's more steps, because more people are dropping off. And so paid ads probably isn't going to be viable for you because you need money for paid ads, right? And so that's what product channel fit means, is building the product for the channel that you want to distribute it on. So a common strategy today is building products that are suitable for social, because social is how people find information nowadays. They're not going to newspapers. Then, most people, instead of going to Google search and finding information, they're doing it on TikTok, or they're doing it on LinkedIn, or they're doing it in Slack, right? And so people are building products that can be easily shared on these channels. So that's what I mean by product channel fit. Another example is, if you look at these dating apps, like I'm a bit out of the game for a few years now, but if you look at like Tinder and Bumble, these apps only existed because mobile became a channel, right? They would have not reached their success if they were desktop applications like the sort of older dating apps, right? And similarly, the dating apps that existed on desktop didn't succeed on mobile because they weren't built for those channels, right? And so that's what I mean by product channel fit. Really important if you want to build something that can exponentially grow on that channel rather than you having to force it. So those are the 4 variables. The last thing I'd say is you should expect that for each of these variables, you will need to iterate them, 3, 4, 5 times each before you sort of find that sweet balance where eventually you're going to find a strong product market fit, right? So you might need to change the customer who you're serving. Maybe the customers you're targeting right now are inherently high churn and you want to change that, right? And that's one of those classic examples of where you can focus on 10 to 20% improvements, like fixing your onboarding or sending more emails or more tactics inside the product to try trick people not to churn. Or you could just target a higher value customer who's not going to churn, right? Or not, he's going to have a higher LTV, is going to stick around for longer, right? Same with problem. Maybe you've got the right customer, but problem A is worth less than problem B. And so you want to make more money, you want to build a bigger business, you want to have higher value customers. And so you go after problem B, etc., hopefully making the point there. But really, I don't think you ever stop. These are just sort of ongoing evolutions of building a company. So the last thing I'll say here is check out the structured interview method. What the hell was that? In the description. And I'm also going to share a video which is about how to validate software startup ideas. Recommend you give that a watch as well. It's a bit longer in detail that people have enjoyed. Cheers.